My name is Marcus. I'm 32 years old, and my own parents told my CEO that my brother deserved my promotion. Before I tell you how a single email thread exposed their sabotage and led to the CEO introducing me as partner instead, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It really helps to know I'm not just sharing this story into the void. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It all happened on what should have been one of the proudest moments of my professional life. The annual company gala was in full swing at the Grand Meridian Hotel. The room sparkled with crystal chandeliers, the champagne flowed freely, and the buzz of achievement filled the air. I stood in a corner, nursing a single glass of scotch, watching my colleagues celebrate another record-breaking year at Nexus Solutions. I'd spent the last 4 years climbing the corporate ladder at Nexus, one of the fastest-growing tech consulting firms in the country. That night, wearing a rented tuxedo that was slightly too tight around the collar, I allowed myself to feel something I rarely permitted: hope. Real, unguarded hope. The kind that makes your chest feel light and your thoughts race ahead to possibilities you usually keep locked away. The buzz around the office had been unmistakable for weeks. The company was creating a new partnership position, and my name was at the top of everyone's speculation list. I'd brought in 3 major clients this year alone. My team's projects consistently came in under budget and ahead of schedule. The numbers didn't lie. There he is, the man of the hour. I turned to see Jessica, our marketing director, approaching with 2 flutes of champagne. She handed me one, replacing my barely touched scotch. "To new horizons," she said with a knowing smile, clinking her glass against mine. "You know something I don't?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Jessica's smile widened. "Just say I wouldn't be surprised if you need new business cards after tonight's announcements." My stomach did a little flip. I'd been hoping sure, but hearing it from Jessica made it feel real in a way it hadn't before. I took a sip of champagne to hide whatever expression might be betraying my emotions. "Don't jinx it," I said. But inside, I was already calculating what this would mean. Partnership, equity, security, a real seat at the table after years of fighting for every inch of recognition. I scanned the room, looking for Richard Caldwell, our CEO. He was at the center of a small group near the stage, gesturing animatedly as he told one of his famous industry war stories. His silver hair caught the light, and his commanding presence drew every eye in his vicinity. When Richard spoke, people listened, and tonight he was going to speak about me. Or so I thought. The moment shattered when I saw them enter the ballroom. My parents, Robert and Diana West, looking polished and professional and formal where I'd never seen before, and trailing slightly behind them, looking uncomfortable in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, was my younger brother. Peter. What were they doing here? I hadn't invited them. This was a company event, strictly for employees and their +1s. I'd mentioned the gala in passing during our monthly family dinner, but nothing more. A cold weight settled in my stomach, replacing the buoyant hope. From moments before, something was wrong. Very wrong. I excused myself from Jessica and made my way through the crowd toward them, trying to keep my expression neutral. My mother spotted me first, her face lighting up with that camera-ready smile she'd perfected over decades of social climbing. "Marcus, darling," she called out too loudly, drawing glances from nearby colleagues. She embraced me, enveloping me in a cloud of expensive perfume. What a magnificent event. "You didn't tell us it would be so grand?" "That's because I didn't invite you," I said quietly, keeping a smile plastered on my face for anyone watching. "How did you even get in?" My father clapped me on the shoulder, his grip just tight enough to be uncomfortable. "Now, is that any way to greet your family?" I called the company and explained we wanted to surprise you. The receptionist was very accommodating. Of course she was. The front desk staff knew my parents from the handful of times they'd visited. The office always making a show of how proud they were of their executive son to anyone who would listen. They played the part of supportive parents perfectly when it suited them. Peter hung back, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "This wasn't my idea," he mumbled when our eyes met. I believed him. Peter and I had a complicated relationship, but he wasn't one for surprises or scenes. Well, you're here now, I said, trying to regain my composure. Just try to blend in. This is an important night. My mother's eyes gleamed. Oh, we know, darling. Richard called us personally. The cold weight in my stomach turned to ice. Richard called you? My father said casually, as if discussing the weather. We thought it was only right that we be here to support both our sons on such a momentous occasion. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Both our sons? Before I could process what that meant, the feedback from a microphone cut through the room, and all eyes turned toward the stage. Richard Caldwell stood there, commanding attention without effort. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for a few moments. First, I want to thank each and every one of you for another exceptional year at Nexus Solutions. Applause filled the room. I barely heard it over the rushing in my ears. As many of you know, our continued growth has created the need for new leadership positions. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce our newest partner, someone who has demonstrated extraordinary talent, vision, and commitment to our company's mission. This was it. The moment I'd been working toward for years. But my parents' presence, my father's words, both our sons, had thrown everything into confusion. Richard's voice continued, but it sounded distant now. This individual has consistently shown the innovative thinking and relationship-building skills that define Nexus at its best. I felt my mother's hand grip my arm, her nails digging in slightly through the fabric of my jacket. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes were calculating, as they darted between me and Peter. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to announce our newest partner at Nexus Solutions. The pause stretched for what felt like an eternity. Marcus West. The room erupted in applause. Jessica caught my eye from across the room, giving me a thumbs up. My team members were cheering loudly. I should have been elated. This was everything I'd worked for. But all I could feel was the sudden stiffening of my mother's grip on my arm, the subtle shift in my father's posture. I glanced at Peter, who looked relieved. Go on, he said quietly. That's your cue. I made my way to the stage, shaking hands and accepting congratulations as I went. By the time I reached Richard, I'd managed to plaster on a convincing smile. He embraced me warmly, then turned me to face the crowd. Marcus has been with us for just 4 years, but in that time he's transformed our approach to client acquisition and retention. His innovations have increased our closure rate by 42% and client satisfaction scores by a full 27 points. Those aren't just numbers, they're a testament to his vision and dedication. More applause. I scanned the crowd and found my parents. They were standing perfectly still. My mother's smile now brittle, my father's face an unreadable mask. Gave a brief, heartfelt speech, thanking my colleagues, mentioning a few key mentors by name. I didn't acknowledge my family. I couldn't, not when I still didn't understand what was happening. After the formalities, the evening dissolved into celebration. Colleagues came to congratulate me, to share stories of projects we'd worked on together. In any other circumstance, it would have been one of the best nights of my professional life. But I couldn't shake the sense of foreboding. My parents and Peter had positioned themselves near the bar, my father deep in conversation with one of our board members. My mother was working the room like she owned it, introducing herself as Marcus's mother to anyone who would listen. It was almost midnight when Richard found me again, 2 tumblers of scotch in hand. He offered me one. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "Thank you, Richard. For everything, you earned it, Marcus." Every bit of it. He took a sip, then added, "Though I must say, your brother's resume is also quite impressive. Different industry, of course, but solid experience." My glass stopped halfway to my lips. My brother's resume. Richard looked momentarily confused. "Yes, the one your parents sent over. Didn't they discuss it with you?" "They were quite insistent that I consider him for the position as well," said. "Something about keeping it in the family." The room seemed to tilt slightly. They sent you Peter's resume for the partnership about 3 weeks ago. I assumed it was with your knowledge. Richard studied my face. I see that it wasn't. No, I said, the word coming out more sharply than I intended. Definitely wasn't. Richard nodded slowly. I thought it was unusual. That's why I called them yesterday to clarify that the partnership was going to you. I was very clear about that, so that's why they had shown up. They'd tried to secure the partnership for Peter behind my back, and when that failed, they came anyway. Why? To see the fallout? To salvage something from their failed plan? Marcus, Richard said, his voice pulling me back to the present. Whatever's going on with your family, don't let it diminish this moment. You earned this partnership through your own merit, your own hard work. That's what matters. I nodded, grateful for his words, but unable to shake the betrayal that was burning its way through my chest. If you'll excuse me, I said, I need to have a word with my family. I found them near the coat check, preparing to leave. My father was helping my mother with her wrap, while Peter stood awkwardly to the side. Were you planning to congratulate me before you left? I asked, my voice steady, despite the anger simmering just below the surface. My mother turned, her smile practiced and perfect. Of course, darling. We're so proud. Though we were surprised given what your father discussed with Richard last week. You mean when you tried to convince my CEO to give my promotion to Peter instead? Wait, what? At least he seemed genuinely shocked. Small comfort. My father stepped forward, straightening to his full height, though I'd outgrown him years ago. Now, Marcus, that's not how it was. We simply presented Richard with options. The best candidate for the family? The family, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. This isn't about the family. This is my career, my work, my achievement. Don't be selfish, Marcus, my mother hissed, dropping the pleasant facade now that no one else was within earshot. You've always been so single-minded. Peter has been struggling at Johnson Financial. This could have been a fresh start for him, a chance to really establish himself. I looked at Peter, who had the decency to look mortified. Did you know about this? He shook his head. They told me they were talking to one of your executives about potential openings in a different department. Entry-level stuff. I had no idea they were pushing for. This, I believed him. Peter and I had our issues, but outright deception wasn't his style. That was more our parents' specialty. Let me make something perfectly clear, I said, turning back to my parents. You had no right to interfere in my professional life. None. Peter has his own career path, and I have mine. The fact that you would try to derail years of my hard work to give him a shortcut he didn't earn and isn't qualified for is, I struggle to find words strong enough. Typical, I finally said. It's completely typical of how you've always operated. My father's face hardened. You watch your tone, young man. Everything we've done has been for this family. Your success is the family's success. Your resources are the family's resources. That's how it's always been. And there. It was the family doctrine laid bare in its naked entitlement. I'd heard variations of this my entire life, but never had it been so transparently self-serving. Not anymore, I said quietly. My success is my own. I built it despite you, not because of you. My mother's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed? To mean after everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I cut in, surprised by my own boldness. Did you pay for my college? No. I worked full-time while carrying a full course load to afford tuition. Did you help with rent when I was starting out? No, I lived with 3 roommates in a studio apartment and ate ramen for dinner most nights. Did you support my career choices? No. You called my decision to join a startup, throwing away my potential. I took a deep breath. The only thing you've ever done is take credit for my achievements while doing everything possible to redirect resources to Peter. Peter flinched at that, and I immediately regretted dragging him into it so directly. This wasn't really about him. It was about our parents' manipulative system. You don't understand family loyalty, my father said, his voice low and dangerous. You never have. Loyalty goes both ways, I replied. And yours has only ever gone in one direction. My mother stepped between us, ever the mediator when scenes threatened to spill into public view. This isn't the place for this discussion. We'll talk about it at Sunday dinner. I won't be there, I said with a certainty that surprised even me. I think it's time I took a break from family obligations for a while. Don't be dramatic, Marcus, she snapped. Oh, of course you'll be there. You're always there. That was true. Despite everything, I'd dutifully shown up to every family dinner, every holiday, every event where my presence was expected. I'd swallowed my resentment and played my assigned role, the successful son whose achievements somehow belonged to everyone but him. Not anymore, I said, and the words felt like breaking free of chains I hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. Congratulate me on my partnership or don't, but either way, we're done here. I turned to Peter. This isn't about you. We'll talk later. He nodded, looking both relieved and apprehensive. I walked away without looking back, returning to the celebration that was still in full swing. To my colleagues who were genuinely happy for my success. To people who saw me for my contributions, not for what they could extract from me. It wasn't until I got home that night, the glow of professional achievement tempered by family betrayal, that I realized what had happened. This wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was simply the most brazen example of a pattern that had defined my entire life. To understand why a single promotion could fracture a family so completely, you need to understand the landscape of my childhood. It wasn't a home so much as a carefully constructed hierarchy, with a rigid value system that benefited some and exploited others. Growing up in the West household meant living under the doctrine of what my parents called family first. On the surface, it sounded wholesome and supportive. In reality, it was a system designed to channel resources from the capable to the struggling, with my parents as the sole arbiters of who deserved what. My earliest memory of this system in action comes from when I was just 9 years old. Won the school science fair with a project on renewable energia, working miniature wind turbine I'd built entirely on my own. The prize was a $100 savings bond and a chance to compete at the regional level. I was ecstatic, already planning improvements to my design. That same week, Peter, who was 7, had thrown a tantrum because he wanted an expensive new video game console. My parents had initially said no, pointing out that his grades didn't warrant such a reward. The night after my science fair win, my father called a family meeting at the dining room table. My mother brought out what they called the family ledger, a leather-bound book where they tracked family finances with meticulous detail. Marcus, my father began, his voice serious. We're very proud of your science fair victory. I beamed, clutching my blue ribbon. As you know, in this family, we all contribute to the greater good, he continued. Your mother and I have been discussing how best to use your savings bond. My smile faltered. Use my savings bond? Yes, dear, my mother chimed in. It's going into the family fund. Specifically, we're putting it toward Peter's new gaming system. I looked at Peter, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but not enough to refuse the arrangement. But I earned it, I said, my voice small. It's mine. My father's expression hardened. There is no mine in this family, Marcus. There's only ours. Your win is the family's win. Your prize is the family's prize. But I was going to use it to make my turbine better for the regional competition, I protested. You don't need money for that, my mother said dismissively. You can use household materials like you did for this one. Be resourceful. Meanwhile, my father added, this will teach Peter the value of academic achievement by showing him the rewards it can bring. Even at 9, I recognized the twisted logic. Peter was being rewarded for my achievement. He was learning that he didn't have to work for rewards, they would be redirected to him regardless. I went to the regional science fair with my unimproved project and lost 2 competitors who had clearly invested in better materials. When I came home disappointed, my mother said, "See? This just proves that throwing money at something doesn't guarantee success. It's a valuable lesson." Peter, meanwhile, was engrossed in his new gaming system, the one my prize money had helped purchase. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood and into our young adult lives. When I was 16, I spent weekends and summers working at a local electronics store, saving every penny for a used car. By the time senior year rolled around, I had nearly $3,000 saved, enough for a decent, reliable vehicle to get me to the community college where I'd been taking advanced classes. The hearing for my car fund took place, as always, at the dining room table. The family ledger came out. My mother clicked her pen. "Marcus, we understand you want to purchase a vehicle," my father began formally. "Yes, I've saved $2,850, I said, presenting my bank statement as evidence. I'd learned that preparation was key to these negotiations, though it rarely changed. The outcome. "That's very impressive, dear," my mother said. "However, there are some family expenses we need to consider." My heart sank. I knew what was coming. "Peter's hockey equipment needs to be replaced," my father explained. "The team is traveling to the state championship, and he needs new gear to compete at that level." Peter, then 14, was a decent hockey player, but not exceptional. He'd recently expressed interest in the sport, and my parents had immediately invested in the best equipment, private coaching, and travel teams. "How much does the equipment cost?" I asked, already knowing it would be suspiciously close to my car savings. "About $2,000, my mother said, "which we feel is a reasonable portion of your savings to contribute to the family fund." 2/3 of my car fund gone in an instant, not enough left for anything reliable. "This is my money," I argued, my voice cracking with frustration. "I worked weekends and holidays for 2 years to save it, and we're very proud of your work ethic," my father said. "But in this family, we support each other's pursuits. Peter supports you academically by allowing you quiet study time. You support him athletically by contributing to his equipment needs." The false equivalence was staggering. My quiet study habits cost them nothing. Peter's hockey hobby cost thousands. "This isn't fair," I said. A phrase I'd learned was meaningless in the West household. "Fair doesn't mean equal, Marcus," my mother said, a refrain I'd heard countless times. "It means everyone gets what they need to succeed." Somehow, what Peter needed always cost significantly more than what I needed. I ended up with a bike instead of a car, pedaling 6 miles each way to my community college classes even. In the winter, Peter got top-of-the-line hockey gear and never made it past the first round of the state championship. The pattern continued into college. I earned a partial academic scholarship, but had to work nearly full-time to cover the rest of my tuition and living expenses. When I graduated with my business degree, I had $42,000 in student loan debt despite my scholarship and constant work. Peter, meanwhile, changed majors 3 times, took 6 years to graduate with a general studies degree, and somehow emerged debt-free. My parents had covered his tuition in full, explaining that Peter needs more support to find his path. The only person who ever acknowledged the fundamental unfairness of this system was my maternal grandfather, Harold. He was a self-made success story, having built a modest construction company from nothing after returning from Vietnam. He saw through my parents' manipulations and did what he could to counterbalance them. When I visited him on weekends during high school, he'd slip me $50 or $100 bills. "For your car fund," he'd whisper with a wink. "Don't tell your parents. This is between us." He taught me about investing, showing me how to research stocks and understand market trends. On my 18th birthday, he helped me open a brokerage account with a $500 deposit. "A man needs to control his own financial destiny," he told me. "Never let anyone, not even family, dictate what you do with the fruits of your labor." Grandpa Harold died during my junior year of college. His loss hit me hard, not just because I loved him, but because I'd lost my only ally in the family system at the reading of his will. I received a shock. He'd left me $25,000 in a trust that my parents couldn't access. The letter accompanying it read simply, "For my builder grandson. Use this to construct your own path, free from obligation. Your success belongs to you alone." My parents were furious. They didn't say it directly, but their disapproval radiated through the lawyer's office. They believed all financial windfalls should go through them for fair distribution. I kept the inheritance secret and used it strategically. I didn't pay off my student loans all at once, which would have raised questions. Instead, I invested most of it. using small withdrawals to ease my financial burden while maintaining the appearance of a struggling recent graduate. That inheritance was my first taste of true financial independence, and I guarded it jealously.
Ow.
It became the foundation of what I privately called my escape fund
Money.
that existed outside my parents' knowledge or control. After graduation, while Peter moved back home to save money, though, he somehow always had funds for weekend trips and new electronics. I took a risk. Instead of accepting a safe corporate position that my parents approved of, I joined Nexus Solutions then, a promising startup with about 30 employees. "You're throwing away your business degree," my father said when I told them. "Startups fail. You need stability." "Peter needs stability," I corrected him. "I need opportunity." The gamble paid off. Success grew rapidly, and I grew with it. I worked 80-hour weeks, volunteered for the projects no one else wanted, and made myself indispensable. Within 4 years, I'd been promoted 3 times, eventually leading our client acquisition team. All the while, I maintained the appearance of modest success. I lived in a small apartment, drove a used car, and dressed nicely, but not extravagantly. To my parents, presented the image of someone doing well, but not exceptionally, not well enough to be contributing to the family fund in any significant way. In reality, between my salary, bonuses, and the growth of my grandfather's inheritance in the market, I was building substantial wealth. I just kept it carefully hidden from the family that had spent a lifetime treating my resources as communal property. Which brings us back to the partnership announcement the night. Everything finally came to a head. My parents' attempt to redirect my hard-earned promotion to Peter was just the latest and most brazen example of their lifelong pattern. The difference was that this time, I was ready to break the pattern for good. The morning after the gala, I woke to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages from my parents. I ignored them all. Instead, I made coffee, sat on the balcony of my apartment, and watched the sunrise with a sense of strange, liberating calm. For the first time in my adult life, I felt fully in control of my own narrative. No more pretending, no more managing appearances, no more carefully doled out information. I had drawn a line, and regardless of what came next, I knew I wouldn't step back across it. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Peter. Unlike my parents, I decided to answer his call. "Hey," I said, my voice neutral. "Marcus," he sounded. Hesitant. I just wanted to say. I really didn't know what they were doing. Thought they were asking about entry-level positions, maybe in IT. I never would have agreed to them pushing me for your promotion. I believed him. Peter had been as much a product of our parent system as I had just on the receiving rather than the giving end. "I know," I said. "This isn't about you. Not really. It's about them and the way they've operated our entire lives. They're losing their minds, he said. "Dad's talking about driving to your apartment. Mom's been crying on and off all morning." "Let them," I replied, surprised by my own detachment. "I'm done being manipulated." There was a long pause before Peter spoke again. "For what it's worth, congratulations on the partnership. You deserve it." It was perhaps the first time he'd acknowledged one of my achievements without somehow making it about him or what it could do for him. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. "Thanks, Peter. I've got to go." I hung up and blocked my parents' numbers. Then I got dressed and headed to the office. It was time to start my new chapter as a partner, and as a man finally free from the invisible strings that had controlled him for too long. After the formalities, the evening dissolved into celebration. Colleagues continued to congratulate me, sharing stories and raising toasts to our shared successes. Under normal circumstances, this would have been the crowning achievement of my career so far. Instead, I felt like I was acting in 2 different plays simultaneously. The public celebration of professional success and the private family drama unfolding in the shadows of the ballroom. I kept one eye on my parents throughout the night. They had positioned themselves strategically near the bar, my father deep in conversation with several board members, no doubt spinning some narrative about his role in my success. My mother flitted from group to group, introducing herself as Marcus's mother with practiced humility that barely concealed her underlying disappointment. As the night wore on, I found myself drawn into a conversation with Elaine Chen, our brilliant head of product development. She'd been one of my earliest supporters at Nexus. "I knew from your first presentation that you were partner material," she said, her eyes bright with genuine pride. "Remember that disaster with the Rothman account? Everyone else was running for cover, but you stepped up with a solution." I smiled at the memory. The Rothman account had been a nightmare, a demanding client with impossible deadlines and constantly shifting requirements. When their primary contact at Nexus quit in frustration, I volunteered to take over, working weekends and late nights, to salvage the relationship. "That was a trial by fire," I admitted. "And you didn't just survive it, you turned it into one of our strongest client relationships," Elaine said. "That's why you're wearing the partner title tonight, and not someone else." Not someone else. Like my brother, who had never worked a weekend in his life. As if summoned by my thoughts, Peter appeared at my elbow, looking even more uncomfortable than he had earlier. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Somewhere private." I excused myself from Elaine and led Peter to a small terrace off the main ballroom. The night air was cool, a welcome relief from the heat of the crowded room. "Congratulations," Peter said, leaning against the railing. "Seriously, this is huge." "Thanks," I replied, still not sure what to make of his role in our parents' scheme. He seemed to read my thoughts. I swear I didn't know what they were. Planning. "Dad told me they were talking to your company about potential opportunities for me, but I thought it was entry-level stuff, something to help me transition out of finance." I studied my brother's face. Peter had always been an open book, terrible at hiding his emotions, worse at lying. It was one of the few traits I genuinely appreciated about him. Looking at him now, I saw only sincerity and embarrassment. "Why would you want to leave Johnson Financial?" I asked. "I thought you were on the fast track there." Peter laughed. "But there was no humor in it." "Is that what they told you?" "I've been on probation for the last 6 months. They're letting me go at the end of the quarter." This was news to me. At our monthly family dinners, my parents had painted Peter's career in glowing terms. Challenging but rewarding, with plenty of growth potential. Another carefully constructed fiction. "What happened?" I asked. Peter shrugged, his shoulders slumping. "The usual. I missed deadlines. Failed to bring in new accounts. Honestly, I hate finance. I've always hated it." "Then why?" "Because Dad said it was the right move. Prestigious firm, good salary, family connections to get me in the door." He looked out at the city lights. "I never wanted any of it, but it was easier to go along than to fight." For the first time, I saw my brother clearly, not as my competitor for resources and approval, but as another victim of our parents' controlling system. The difference was that while I had rebelled and built my own path, Peter had acquiesced and allowed himself to be molded into something he wasn't. "What do you actually want to do?" I asked, realizing I'd never bothered to find out. Peter's eyes lit up, the first genuine animation I'd seen from him all night. "I've been taking coding classes online, back-end development. I'm actually pretty good at it. It's logical, challenging in the right ways. I feel like I'm building something, you know?" I did know. That feeling of creation, of problem-solving, was exactly what had drawn me to my own career. "Why haven't you told Mom and Dad?" His expression darkened. I tried. Dad said programming was glorified typing and that I needed to focus on real business instead of playing with computers. The dismissal was so typically Robert West that I almost laughed. Our father, perpetually stuck in 1985, still saw technology as a supporting function rather than the driving force of modern business. "So what are you going to do when Johnson Financial lets you go?" Peter ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood. "That's the thing. I don't know. I've got some savings, but not much. Certainly not enough to support myself while I try to break into a new field." The implication was clear. Without a job, Peter would move back home, right back under our parents' control, dependent on their support and subject to their manipulation. Before I could respond, the terrace door opened, and my father stepped out, his face tightening when he saw us together. "There you are," he said, his voice overly jovial. "The men of the hour." "Man," I corrected quietly, singular. "My father's." Smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "Your mother and I are leaving. Early meeting tomorrow." He turned to Peter. "Are you coming with us or taking an Uber later?" The question wasn't really a question. It was a command disguised as a choice, another hallmark of Robert West's parenting style. Peter shot me an apologetic look. I should go. We'll talk later, okay? I nodded, watching as my father ushered him back inside, one hand firmly on his shoulder. The gesture was familiar, the guiding hand that looked supportive to outsiders, but felt like a vice grip to the recipient. I stayed on the terrace for a few minutes longer, processing everything I'd learned. Peter was about to lose his job. My parents had tried to secure my promotion for him. Now, with both plots failed, they were retreating to regroup and plan. Their next move? I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't over. The West family drama never ended with a single confrontation. It evolved, adapted, and came back stronger. When I finally returned to the party, Richard was waiting for me near the bar, 2 tumblers of whiskey in hand. He offered one to me. "Everything all right?" he asked, his shrewd eyes missing nothing. "You seemed distracted during your big moment." I took a sip of the whiskey, letting the burn center me. Family complications. Nothing that will affect my work. Richard nodded slowly. Family can be complicated, especially when they're involved in your professional life. Something in his tone made me look up sharply. "What exactly did my parents say to you about the partnership position?" Richard considered me for a moment, then led me to a quiet corner of the room. "I wasn't going to bring this up tonight, but since you asked," he pulled out his phone, opened his email, and handed it to me. This arrived 3 weeks ago. The email was from my father, sent from his personal account to Richard's direct email, an address that wasn't publicly available. The subject, line read: "Regarding the partnership opportunity, a family perspective." With growing disbelief, I read, "Richard, first let me thank you for the courtesy you've always shown to our family. Diana and I have watched with pride as Marcus has grown under your mentorship at Nexus Solutions. It has come to our attention that you're considering him for a partnership position. While we couldn't be prouder of his achievements, we feel it's our duty as parents to provide some additional context that might inform your decision. Our younger son, Peter, has been developing his career at Johnson Financial for several years now. He possesses many of the same qualities that have made Marcus successful: intelligence, strategic thinking, and leadership potential, but with an additional depth of financial expertise that could be invaluable to Nexus as it continues to grow. We believe that considering both candidates would provide you with the fullest picture of the talent available to your organization. Peter's resume is attached for your review. In the spirit of full disclosure, we should mention that Marcus has occasionally struggled with the pressures of high-level responsibilities. While he has clearly thrived at Nexus thus far, we worry that the demands of partnership might prove overwhelming without the right support system. Peter, on the other hand, has demonstrated remarkable resilience under pressure at Johnson Financial. We would welcome the opportunity to discuss this matter further at your convenience, perhaps over dinner next week. Sincerely, Robert West attached. To the email was Peter's resume, heavily edited and embellished to emphasize skills and achievements he didn't possess. I felt physically ill. It wasn't just that they had tried to redirect my promotion to Peter, they had actively tried to undermine me in the process, painting me as emotionally unstable and unsuited for leadership while positioning him as the more qualified candidate. "I don't know what to say," I managed finally, handing the phone back to Richard. I had no idea they'd done this. Richard pocketed his phone. "I didn't think you did. That's why I called them yesterday, to make it absolutely clear that the partnership was going to you based on your merits and your merits alone. And that's when they decided to show up tonight," I said, the pieces falling into place. "Apparently so." Richard took another sip of his whiskey. "Look, Marcus, I've been in business long enough to recognize family dynamics at play. Whatever's going on there, don't let it diminish what you've accomplished. You've earned this partnership through your own work, your own talent." The same words he'd used earlier, but they hit differently now that I'd seen the email. Richard hadn't just been offering generic encouragement, he'd been deliberately countering my parents' narrative. "Thank you," I said, meaning it more than he could know. "For the opportunity, and for seeing through this." Richard nodded. "The next few months will be challenging as you settle into your new role. Focus on that. Whatever's happening with your family, deal with it on your own time." It was sound advice. Compartmentalization had been my survival strategy for years. Anyway, the remainder of the evening passed in a blur. By the time I arrived home, It was nearly 2 a.m. I kicked off my dress shoes, loosened my tie, and collapsed onto my couch, physically and emotionally drained. My phone buzzed with a text from Peter. "We need to talk. Lunch tomorrow?" I agreed to meet him at a small cafe halfway between our offices. Then I turned off my phone, shutting out the world for a few precious hours of sleep. The next morning, I woke to a relentless pounding on my apartment door. I dragged myself out of bed, threw on a t-shirt, and peered through the peephole. My father stood in the hallway, his face set in a mask of righteous indignation. For a brief, cowardly moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. But I knew this confrontation was inevitable. It's better to have it on my terms, in my space. I opened the door, but blocked the entrance with my body. "It's 7:30 in the morning. What are you doing here?" My father tried to push past me into the apartment. I didn't budge. "We need to talk about your behavior last night," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "The way you spoke to your mother and me in public, no less?" "No," I interrupted, surprised by my own calm. "We don't need to talk about that. What we need to talk about is this." I held up my phone, displaying a screenshot of his email to Richard that I'd asked my CEO to forward to me last night. My father's face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. "You weren't supposed to see that, clearly," I said. "That's the problem, isn't it? All these years you've been playing games behind my back, thinking I'd never find out. Well, surprise, I found out. It wasn't a game," he insisted. "It was a legitimate attempt to help your brother. You've always been so selfish, Marcus, so unwilling to share your opportunities." The accusation was so absurd, so completely backward, that I actually laughed. "Selfish? I've been funding your lifestyle for years. Who do you think paid for Mom's birthday cruise last year?
Oh.
Or your golf club membership? Or the repairs on the lake house?" His eyes widened slightly. He hadn't known about those things. I'd arranged them quietly, anonymously, through family channels that kept my name out of it. It had been my private compromise, a way to support my family without subjecting myself to their control. "That's different," he sputtered. "Those were gifts." "No," I said, my voice hardening. "Those were concessions, payments to keep the peace. And now the price has gone up to include my career, my reputation, and my future. That's too high." My father's expression shifted, anger giving way to calculation. He had always been able to read me, to find the weak points in my armor. Now he softened his approach. "Marcus, I know you're upset, but try to see this from our perspective. Peter is struggling. He needs a fresh start, a real opportunity. You've always been the strong one, the capable one. We just thought that you could sabotage me to elevate him." I finished. "That's not parenting. That's manipulation." "We would never sabotage you," he protested. "We were simply presenting options to your CEO by claiming I'm emotionally unstable. By lying about Peter's qualifications. It's textbook sabotage." My father sighed heavily, as if I were a child failing to grasp a simple concept. "This isn't productive. Why don't you come to dinner tonight? Your mother is making your favorite. We can discuss this calmly as a family." There it was, the olive branch that wasn't really an olive branch. The invitation back into the fold, where they could work on me collectively, wearing down my resistance, with a combination of guilt, obligation, and manipulation. It was a dance we'd performed countless times before, but not this time. "No," I said firmly. "I won't be coming to dinner tonight, or any night in the foreseeable future. I need time and space away from you and Mom, away from this toxic system you've created." My father's face hardened again, the brief vulnerability vanishing. "Don't be dramatic, Marcus. You can't just cut us off because of one misunderstanding." "It's not one misunderstanding," I replied. "It's a lifetime of them, and I'm not cutting you off. I'm setting boundaries." "There's a difference." "Boundaries," he scoffed. "That's therapist talk. In a family, there are no boundaries. There's loyalty, duty, and respect. All of which should go both ways," I pointed out. "When have you ever respected my choices? When have you ever been loyal to my dreams instead of your agenda for me?" He had no answer for that, just as I knew he wouldn't. "I have to get ready for work," I said, starting to close the door. "My first day as partner. I'm sure you understand." His hand shot out, holding the door open. This isn't over, Marcus. For once, I agreed with him. No, it isn't. It's changing. Starting now. I closed the door firmly and leaned against it, my heart racing. In all my years of carefully managed rebellion, I had never so directly opposed my father. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. My phone buzzed with a text from Peter. Dad just called, raging. What happened? I replied simply, I'll tell you at lunch. I arrived at work early, eager to immerse myself in the familiar challenges of my job. My assistant had already updated my door plaque and business cards to reflect my new title, Marcus West, partner. Seeing it in print made it real in a way that even last night's ceremony hadn't. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and congratulatory emails. By the time I met Peter for lunch, I had almost managed to push the family drama to the back of my mind. The cafe was busy, filled with professionals from the surrounding office buildings. Peter was already there, tucked into a corner booth, his tie loosened and his expression anxious. You look like hell, I observed, sliding into the seat across from him. Didn't sleep much, he admitted. Mom and Dad were up half the night, arguing about you. Then Dad stormed out this morning and came back even angrier. What did you say to him? I signaled a waiter and ordered coffee before answering. I told him I saw the email he sent to my CEO, the one trying to position you for my partnership. While undermining my mental stability, Peter winced. Jesus, Marcus, I had no idea they went that far. I believe you, I said, and I did. Peter might have benefited from our parents' manipulations over the years, but he had rarely been an active participant in them. So what now? He asked. For me, distance. I'm taking a break from family obligations while I focus on my new role and figure out what kind of relationship I actually want with them. Peter nodded slowly. And what about us? It was a good question. What about us? Peter and I had never been close. Our parent system had pitted us against each other from childhood. Me as the provider, him as the recipient. It was a dynamic designed to breed resentment, not brotherhood. That depends, I said carefully. Last night you mentioned you're being let go from Johnson Financial. What's your plan? Peter looked down at his coffee. I don't really have one. Dad wants me to leverage his contacts for another finance position. Mom thinks I should move back home and regroup. And what do you want? He looked up, surprised by the question. I told you I want to code, build things, solve problems. I considered him for a long moment. The conversation on the terrace last night had revealed a side of Peter I'd never seen, a passion, direction, a desire to create rather than just consume. It was the first genuine interest he'd expressed in, well, maybe ever. What if I could help you with that? I asked. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. What do you mean? Nexus is always looking for developers. Entry-level positions for people with aptitude, even without formal experience. The pay wouldn't match Johnson Financial, at least not at first, but it would be a foot in the door. You'd do that for me? After everything? Surprise in his voice was almost painful to hear. I'm not offering you a job, I clarified. I'm offering you an interview. Whether you get the position would depend entirely on your skills and the assessment of our tech team. No special treatment. For a moment, I thought he might be offended by the condition. Instead, his face broke into a genuine smile. That's fair. More than fair. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I warned. The tech team is notoriously demanding. You'd have to prove yourself every day. I know, he said, and there was a determination in his voice I'd never heard before. That's what I want to earn something on my own merits. Not because Dad pulled strings or you felt obligated. It was such a simple desire, yet so at odds with the way we'd been raised. In the West household, connections and obligations were the currency of advancement. Merit was secondary, if it factored in at all. If you're serious about this, I said, there's something else we need to discuss. Something more important than the job. What's that? Independence? I said firmly. A real independence. From Mom and Dad, from their system, from their control. If you take this opportunity, you can't run back to them at the first sign of difficulty. You can't let them weaponize your struggles against me. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. Peter was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the full weight of what I was proposing. It wasn't just a job opportunity. It was a complete break from the only system he'd ever known. I don't know if I can do that, he admitted finally. Always been my safety net. A safety net that keeps you trapped, I pointed out. Look at where their guidance has led you to a career you hate, on the verge of being fired with no real skills or direction of your own. He flinched at the harsh assessment, but didn't deny it. I'm not saying cut them off completely, I continued, softening my tone. I'm saying establish boundaries. Make your own decisions. Live your own life. Easy for you to say, he muttered. You've always been the strong one. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I wasn't born strong, Peter. I became strong. Out of necessity, because I saw early on that if I didn't fight for my independence, I'd spend my life as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. Peter looked at me with new eyes, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. How did you do it? It was a good question, one I'd spent years figuring out for myself. One decision at a time. One boundary at a time. One victory at a time. I hesitated, then decided to share something I'd never told anyone. Do you remember Grandpa Harold's inheritance? The money he left me when I was in college? Peter nodded. Dad was furious, said it should have gone to the family fund instead. That money was my first real taste of independence. I invested most of it, used it strategically to build a life separate from their control. I still have it, the Marcus Fund, I call it. It's grown substantially over the years. Peter's eyes widened. So all this time, when you've been pleading poverty at family dinners, a necessary deception, I admitted. If they knew what I really had, they'd have found a way to claim it. Just like they tried to claim my partnership. Understanding dawned on his face. That's why you live in that small apartment. Drive that used car. I nodded. All part of maintaining the illusion of modest success. Meanwhile, I've been building real wealth and real security, just not where they could see it or touch it. Peter shook his head, a mixture of admiration and disbelief on his face. You've been playing chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. Not chess, I corrected. Survival. And now, I'm offering you the chance to do the same. Not with an inheritance, but with an opportunity to build something of your own. The job interview, he said, if you want it. Peter took a deep breath. Straightening his shoulders, I want it, and I want what you're talking about. Independence. Self-respect. A life that's mine. For the first time in our adult lives, I felt a genuine connection with my brother, not as competitors in our parents' twisted system, but as allies against it. Then let's make it happen, I said, extending my hand across the table. He shook it firmly, sealing a new kind of partnership, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation. As we finished our lunch, mapping out next steps for his interview, and his gradual separation from our parents' control, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead wouldn't be easy for either of us. Our parents wouldn't release their grip without a fight, and Peter's journey to independence would be filled with challenges and setbacks. But for the first time, we were facing these challenges as brothers in the truest sense, supporting each other's growth rather than competing for scraps from our parents' table. As we parted outside the cafe, Peter hesitated, then asked, "What about Sunday dinner this weekend? Are you going?" I shook my head. No, I meant what I said about needing distance. But that's my boundary, not yours. You need to decide your own, he nodded thoughtfully. I think I'll go. But this time, I'll be watching with open eyes, really seeing the dynamics for what they are. That's a start, I said. Awareness is always the first step. We parted ways, each returning to our respective offices, him to a job that was ending, me to one that was just beginning. Both of us were moving forward with a new understanding, a new alliance, and a new determination to break free from the patterns that had defined our lives for too long. The real war for independence was just beginning. But for the first time, I wasn't fighting it alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.